Hey, hey, hey. Hi everybody. It's good to be here. It is a new day, a new week. Um yeah, last week kind of was dumb. Last week was a dumb week. Um anyway, we can talk about that. Maybe we won't. But yeah, I'm really excited. Welcome tonight to Whiskey and Weird. We're going to be diving into a little bit of conversation about UFOs and aliens. I'm kind of excited about that, and I have a couple of interesting stories, one of which just occurred to me literally yesterday. And I had been trying to figure out what to talk about tonight. It's a challenge for me because there's so much going on in this brain that it's hard for me to figure out what I want to do with that. And I felt like there it was. There's my answer. Here, we're going to show you this thing in the sky, and simply so you can choose what you're going to talk about on your show. So tonight, UFOs and aliens. But anyway, hi Tracy, it's good to have you here. Always lovely, lovely, lovely. Thank you for being here. Um, I was saying when I first got on last week. Last week was dumb. Raise your hand if anyone had a dumb week last week. And my show was fine. It was all very fine. Um, but needless to say, I did not pound two beers right before the show tonight, and I made sure that my phone is recording properly because last week it didn't. So when I went to upload my audio from on the podcast app, there was nothing there, and it was just a bunch of really weird, crazy, scary kind of noises. But my son and I figured out what it was that we were hearing. So anyway, it's a new week, it's a new day. And I did have a dram already before, but I did eat tonight too, so that's always a good thing too. Um, Hi, Dean. I'm glad you're here. You're a whiskey drinker, right? 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 What do you like to drink? So, you guys, what are you drinking tonight? By the way, I went to uh, Total Wine and More today, and because I have so much whiskey, but I try to try something new on here. And whiskey is expensive, and I don't have the budget for it all the time. And I've been really lucky to have people buy whiskey for me. Sometimes wine too, but I don't like that as much. And so I did pick up a bottle of Irish whiskey, a new kind that I haven't heard of that I'm going to do next week. I will have a show next week. I will not do a show on St. Patrick's Day, simply because I will be um, just hanging out with family and eating corned beef and cabbage and drinking whiskey and Guinness and all of that stuff. So I'm going to definitely going to do that. Hey, Tracy, Sauvignon Blanc. There you go. You know what? We all have our thing. Hey, Jim, drive safely. Um, so anyway, I picked up a bunch of these. Like, no duh, this is probably the best way to go about it, right? And for those of you who are new here, not new here, for those of you who are new to Whiskey and Weird, and maybe new to me, I would, my favorite. I mean, I guess it's just my starting point where I started. Some of you know this already, was with single malt Scotch. And it's always my go-to. And one of the reasons for that is I have a wheat sensitivity, and single malt Scotch is pretty safe. Sometimes I actually have a whiskey right now that I drink every once in a while, and I wake up the next morning and it's like making me cough. It's just a weird thing. Anyway, so Dane's drinking rum and Coke. I like it, but not tonight. Is that because it's a work night? Right? But one's okay, right? So cool. Rum and Coke. We got wine. See if anyone else is willing to chime in about that. But yeah, so I grabbed one because I was looking at these whiskeys, particularly this Scotch, and it's way out of my price range to get like one, right? And so this is a Highland single malt Scotch, Grange Stone, um, and these bottles were running like $70 to $90 a bottle. So I'm expecting it to be really good. I don't know. That doesn't necessarily mean anything, right? And this one, I got two different ones. I'll try another one probably in a few weeks, but this one is bourbon. It's a bourbon cask finish. So it's in, oak barrels and then moved to bourbon casks. So I think that's going to be a pretty interesting experience. And let's open it up. Let's take a little nose peek here. I always like to smell it out of the bottle because it sometimes is very different, right? Well, it's nice. It's pleasant. Again, if you're new to whiskey and weird, the nose part, I love smelling it like that. I can smell the notes in whiskey and even wine and even coffees and things a lot more than I can actually taste them. But probably shouldn't shove it up my nose though, right? So yeah, really mellow, fruity. I'm getting fruity. For a second, like I almost thought pineapple, which is kind of interesting. The whole idea of the notes that come through in this stuff is so intriguing to me. And because none of these things are actually in there, right? And everybody who tries them, you can have 5 different people trying the same whiskey. And they're all gonna, be sensing, tasting, smelling different notes in there. All right, so yeah, still getting the fruity, definitely pineapple, which is new for me. I don't think I've sensed pineapple before. I like it. It's nice. Getting the fruity, not, it's, yeah, a little floral. Nothing over the top. It's really pleasant, actually. So anyway, Sláinte, I'm going to take a sip of this and see what happens. And those of you who don't know, I've been learning this. I'm new to this, right? So, the whole smelling, using different nostrils, because apparently you can smell differently on different sides. I haven't been struck by that myself just yet, but it could happen. And then when you take the first sip, to hold it in your mouth kind of on the roof and just let it sit there for a minute. So that's what I do when I sit here, in case you're wondering and why I'm quiet and just staring off into space for like 30 seconds. Mm. 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 Okay. Little tingly. I like that. Um, Not overly viscous, which I like too. It is so it's got a really quick finish, which is good. Just a hint of a burn. Definitely got the floral in the taste too. Um, but generally speaking, and I think I'm probably a little biased because, as I said, I like single malt Scotch. No, I haven't had that much whiskey yet. And if you weren't here yet, this is Grangestone. It's a Highland Scotch whiskey. Most of the ones I like are from the Speyside area, which is kind of a smaller. I'll share a map later for people who are interested in that. Just kind of the different regions where Scotch is produced in Scotland. And Speyside's a much smaller region. The Highland region's much larger. And most of what I drink, Glenfiddich, Glenlivet, those kinds of things, all come from Speyside. And probably the most well-known scotches come from there. But as you know, I'm trying to branch out a little bit. But yeah, I'm enjoying this. I highly recommend this this Grangestone. It's a bourbon cask. It's yeah. And I don't know that I get a lot of that, actually, now that I think of it. It's not overwhelming. That's interesting because when I first started drinking, I didn't drink a lot of bourbon. And I kind of wonder if I would have noticed that, if it would have been a more distinct presence for me when I drank it now, like versus, or when I drink it before versus now, because I do enjoy bourbon also. So as you all know, so yeah, Sláinte, Grangestone. If you're chiming in now and you get in here, check out, let me know what you're drinking tonight. Otherwise, let's move on to the fabulous topic of the evening. I'm kind of excited about this. If you didn't chime in at the very beginning, as I was getting started, I didn't really know what I was going to do tonight, and uh, and this was one of my topics. I had a couple other ideas, and again, there's always stuff floating around in my brain that will come out. I'll just talk about anything pretty much. So just I had a really synchronistic experience. And I was thinking earlier too, like synchronicities, we've talked about this, like things that just happen that can't be just coincidences, like, you know, um, things that make you think of someone, whatever. And, last week I did it on deep thoughts from the shower, and just kind of talked about water and things like that. I don't know how many people chimed into that one, but it was funny. I called it deep thoughts from the shower, and then just a couple days later, I had a memory in my Facebook um, that it was actually, I think I shared it from my younger sister, and it was it was those deep thoughts by Jack Handy, which are freaking hilarious. So if you're friends with me on Facebook, you can go find those and read them if you just need to laugh. But I read it in the morning when I was looking at my memories, and just sat and died laughing to myself for a while, and was reminded of this cool story with my sister. She did the Susan G. Komen 3-day with me. 2006 or 2007. And yeah, we laid in our tent, our pink tent at night, reading those and just laughing until we cried. So good memories, interesting synchronicity, right? That would pop up and that I chose that title. I think so anyway. But let's get down to the synchronicity for this whole UFO alien thing. So, and you might have read this. I did post it on Whiskey and Weird yesterday. A couple people saw it. So a few afternoons a week, I hang out with this really cool little 4-year-old, and the weather's been pretty decent. And so we were outside, and just, playing. I think she was riding her bike or something. I don't know. But I recently, there's been a lot of jets flying over, and I'm an Air Force brat, and actually there's something really comforting about the sounds of jets flying over. My father was a navigator, F Force, and so I've been trying to catch them in the sky, which isn't always easy, right? Because they're fast, and you hear them after they go by. So I was trying to look for it in the sky. So my eyes were drawn to the sky, looking for it. I did see it, which was really fun. And then of course I'm trying to show it to a 4-year-old, and anyone who's had a small child, you get me when I like talk about how difficult it is to get them to see anything that you're trying to point at. I'm like pointing up in the sky, and she's looking at the ground. I'm like, no, it's this way. So I'm trying to show her. Anyway, she doesn't see that, but I kind of stay, I'm gazing into the sky, and then I see a bald eagle, which is equally intriguing and fun and fascinating, in my opinion. And so I see the bald eagle. I am watching it, trying to get this little girl to look up at the sky and see the bald eagle, which didn't really go very well. And eventually it went out of my line of vision. But something else caught my eye in the sky. And I was like, what is that? And, there's been plenty of times something catches your eye, and then like, oh yeah, that's just an airplane. It just was a weird angle or whatnot, right? And so I'm looking up at the sky, and I'm watching this. And it was kind of weirdly boxy from what I could tell. And it was grayish silver, and every once in a while, like, light would flicker off of it. Like I don't know if it's the sun or the angle it was flying. I don't know what's happening, but every once in a while it would be like a little, glint off of there. And I'm watching it, and I'm thinking, okay, it wasn't far enough that I could have, that it was an airplane. It was not an airplane, did not have the shape of an airplane. And it wasn't so far away that I would have been seeing that way. And the way it was moving through the sky actually was really interestingly like how a satellite moves through the sky. Just, and how it's just like this really steady pace on this really straight trajectory. Different in my opinion than how you view airplanes. So I'm watching it, And again, you're like staring, what is that? What is that? And you're trying to make sense of what it is. And then all of a sudden, it completely disappears into the blue sky. Like it just disappeared. And it literally was like what you see. I don't know, like it was cloaked. Like that's what it totally looked like. It was so creepy. And then I'm watching it because I know sometimes if you're watching an airplane, how it sometimes will disappear in the sky for a minute, but then it comes back, right? And so um, I waited probably 10, 15, maybe even 20 seconds to see that thing come back, and it didn't. So anyway, it was a very weird experience. And by definition, most certainly a UFO, right? Because it's unidentified for me. It did not present like anything I've ever seen before. And so then actually I went on and I started researching, what's been happening. Because of course, as many people know, UFO sightings have really increased in the last 5 to 10 years. Like, well, UFO sightings, right? We'll get into whether they've actually increased or we're just more aware in a minute. But I looked it up, and actually just last month, February, there was a number of sightings down in downtown Seattle of something silver in the sky, much closer. People were able to make out details of it. So there's definitely something going on. And the state of Washington, ranks really high up there in terms of those. Just like with Bigfoot, these kinds of experiences are really commonly reported around here for whatever reason. And as you might recall, we did talk a bit about the possibility that Bigfoot could be actually an alien or somehow associated with UFOs. However, so anyway, that was a really, really weird thing for me, but kind of fun. And as I said, an interesting synchronicity that I was like, oh, should I talk about this? And someone was like, yeah, you should talk about UFOs and aliens. Here's one right here in the sky. So I did that. Glad to see you're home safe, Jim. Anybody, like, just quick, anybody? Dean, you're new here. So are you here because this topic interests you? I'm wondering. Tracy, I know you always have thoughts on this subject. And so, you guys chime in, ask your questions, tell your stories. I love to hear them. I'll pull them up. So I have to share, I've actually had another experience with a UFO before we get into some of the interesting ideas and theories and stories about UFOs. Let's see. Dean says, let's put this up on the screen so people will be able to see it. You should check out the Tic Tac shaped UFO story reported by Navy. Yeah, I think I think I have seen that story before, but I'll have to revisit it. There are so many really good ones. Yeah. My dad, it's funny, my dad having been a pilot, that's good. I'll check that out. Thanks, Dean. I remember as a kid, and my dad, of course, flew, well, he's a navigator. And then he worked kind of in intelligence kind of stuff, like the kind of work in the Air Force that you can't actually talk about to people. And I've always had some level of interest in this kind of thing, right? So my dad has more or less confirmed with me that this is something that exists and that the military knows about without telling me that. So I think, yes, that I think pilots, there's no way they haven't seen these all the time throughout time, right? Since they've been, not throughout time, throughout the time of airplanes in existence, right? And yeah, so that kind of gets me. Oh, I was going to tell you my story. I got a little sidetracked. So my story about from my first story. Let's see. Jim's letting us know what he's drinking. Homemade Kahlua. Oh, Jim makes a good homemade Kahlua. I've tried it before. Before dinner. So don't ruin your dinner, Jim. Anyway, when I was in high school, I actually must have been a junior in high school because, well, I'll get to that in a second. I was a junior in high school, I believe. And my good friend, maybe a sophomore, my good friend, Lisa, and Lisa might chime in later. So if you do, hi, Lisa. She lived out. So I grew up in Las Vegas, more or less. I moved there. I had lived there when I was little, and then I moved there when I was 13 and stayed all the way through and graduated from high school in Las Vegas. But back then, a long time ago, um, Henderson was just growing. Like, Green Valley was only just becoming a place. And of course, anyone who's been to Las Vegas knows that Green Valley is very much its own place. It was not back then. And my friend, she literally they were building new developments, out there, starting to build homes. And she lived on a street that was quite literally the last street that had been built. And then beyond it was just like total desert. Now the city of Green Valley town, whatever it is, goes on for miles beyond where her house is now, of course. But back then it was nothing. It was just just desert, right? So one night we're coming to her house, probably like after volleyball practice, I don't know. But we were heading up the street, and we look up above us at, like, I'm not very good at estimating like distances, but it couldn't have been more than 100 yards. I can estimate a football field. I'm really good at that. But so probably 100 yards above us. It was pretty big. It was elongated this way, but it looked like it went back. I wouldn't be able to tell you what shape it was necessarily. And it had 3 big lights on the front. And I remember we're like, what the heck? We're like looking out the window, and we pull into her driveway. And I think she happened to have her camera, like I don't know, but we jumped out of the car in a matter of seconds, jumped out of the car, run back out. Her house was the second from the street we had so it wasn't a long way. Look up, there's absolutely nothing. There's nothing in the sky anywhere. There's no sound of an airplane. There's no sound of a helicopter. And so to this day, we really believe that we saw a UFO. Well, and we did to by definition, right? It was an unidentified flying object, but it was really peculiar, and not uncommon again in those parts, right? Down in the desert, there's a lot of that stuff that goes on. So, of course we took a lot of shit for that. And I think even when we graduated from high school and had our senior volleyball banquet, we both got this cheesy book about ET and stuff, and we're still being teased about it a couple of years later. But it was pretty awesome. So Lisa, if you end up listening, you got to chime in. You have to tell me what you remember, talking about memories, right? From our show a few weeks ago. What do you remember about that? But I still can see it completely in my mind's eye when I think about that. It was pretty creepy. So anybody else, I want to know, does anybody else, if you're listening now, if you're listening later, who's had a UFO experience? And by the way, you can chime in here on Wednesdays at 7 here on Facebook at Whiskey and Weird. I also have a YouTube channel, Whiskey and Weird, and then you can find this just an audio version of it can be found on all podcast apps. So if you want to listen to my nonsense while you're out walking or working or whatever, you can do that too. But anyway, so getting to the conversation about this uptick in UFOs, I think the question is, are there really more are there really more incidents? Or are people just paying attention more? Are people looking for them more? Are people, we talk about it a lot more than we used to. Even all of this stuff, now that there's television shows about all of them, people are a lot more mindful, and even having conversations or with people and remembering, and memories coming up like, hey, maybe that's what we saw. It never occurred to us that might have been what we are experiencing. And that certainly would happen with everything from ghosts to Bigfoot to aliens, whatever, that now people are hearing, and maybe something that they just kind of put out of their mind because they couldn't understand or had no idea, and now are getting information that might lend itself to explain what they were experiencing. So I'm curious, what do you guys think about that? Do you think that there is actually more? Are there more people doing, more people actually just seeing and paying attention, or do you think that there's actually more visits from aliens? So chime in, you guys. Let me know what you think about that. And, I also think the fact that more of this is coming out, right? So just not even on TV shows, but, all of this information being released by the military that, yes. So I had this thought, probably in the shower, I don't know, or waking in the morning in a dream. I don't know. But I had a thought sometime in the last week about, um, so people are like, oh, yeah, you're telling us we always knew there were UFOs. But I have this kind of theory that the government's just giving us a little piece to kind of satiate us from what is really what they really have in their awareness. So I'm curious to know if you guys agree, if you have any ideas about that. But I think that we're only given enough information by the government that people can really handle. And, at this point, we know, I mean, we have these shows, so there's a different level, I will say, of comfort, even with the possibility that aliens are out there and are possibly watching us. So yes, it's another thing you can, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about that, if you think that um, that makes any difference in how we're perceiving, how we're witnessing things. Um, Definitely more sightings, during the daytime, like mine was during the day yesterday. And because it's not, at nighttime, it's a lot easier to see something bright and moving in the sky. But in some ways, it's also are harder to tell what it is, right? I mean, how many people see just planes coming in at a weird angle, or when people, let off lanterns, Asian, the Chinese lanterns. Um, I think they do those in multiple cultures, but I know that their Chinese culture does those for different holidays, and they're up in the sky. And the first time you see them, it is kind of like, what the heck is that, right? But I think because we know more about things, like the more we learn about what isn't a UFO, the more questions we have about what might be, right? Maybe, I don't know. I always have more questions as soon as my questions are answered. So there's those questions. I'm curious if you guys are listening, and I would love to hear your feedback. If you're watching later, you can leave comments in there, and I will respond or check them out. So what is an alien, and is it actually walking on the earth, and is it actually out there? Now, first of all, I think it's absolutely 100% ridiculous to not think that there are other things out there. Um, um, Jim says he thinks that until we have a mainstream find sighting reveal, people will always be skeptical. Of course they will. Yeah, you have to have healthy skepticism. Um, yeah, and people. Yeah, yeah. That's just another conversation for another day, isn't it? Like those people versus people like me. But yeah, healthy skepticism is important. But I think people are only skeptical until they experience something that is hard to be skeptical of, and in my experience. So it's easy, and you're always going to have those people. But the more it's happening, the more people are out there and coming forward and saying, yes, this is something I've experienced. And you know what? Here's the thing. People are skeptical of really stupid shit. So just because there's that skepticism doesn't, just means it's simply that, right? It's just skepticism. There's species of animals that get discovered every day, and there's always somebody skeptical of that even happening, right? Of new species or of something someone's claiming they're seeing. So yeah, skepticism, it's important in the field, right? For sure. But anyway, I think though, it's very, very telling of the human ego to think that we are it. Like in this universe, the galaxy, all of it, like it's huge, and the odds of just this one little planet having any kind of creature that lives on it, that might have smarts, that might be able to do stuff. I just think it's just, I don't know. Honestly, I can't understand why people can't go there. Like, I just I think that the ego has really taken over, when people deny that it leave even a possibility. And there are a lot of people that absolutely deny the possibility, that really think, um, um, Jim, if it's out there, how about a discussion on smarter beings and their choice to be seen or not? Um, yeah, we talked a little bit about that in Bigfoot. Now, I do think that aliens are they're of a different dimension than us. I think that it's a whole 5D thing. I do think that there are people that are walking on this earth that are probably um, examples of aliens. And you know what? When you get into like um, mysticism and all of these different things, you know, who we are. So our light, when you talk about our soul, and Dean, I'm going to get to your comment in a second, because you're kind of touching on a little bit of this. So our energy frequencies, you know, there's a lot of belief systems about, and I've been doing a lot of exploration with this, that we are all aliens ourselves in some aspect. We are coming from another realm. For many of us, we've learned to describe that as like heaven, or, you know, God's kingdom and stuff like that. And it probably is a really amazing, beautiful place full of light and love. But, you know, there's all these belief systems around, okay, we're that energy, we're that soul, and we've chosen this experience on the earth, to have the human experience. And but we may have also had other experiences in other places that exist, other star systems and other planets, and things like that. And it does come down to, Dean says, our consciousness is rising and our frequency, here, I'll pull this up, and our frequency is being fine-tuned. The dimensional veil is thinning, more and more craft are coming through. I think that they're coming through, and we're actually just becoming more attuned to them, is what I think. So I think that we are connected to those beings that are coming through. And I do think there are good and bad, like, not just like there's good and bad people. And some of those here's another thing, is that, so those alien species are other beings just like us, that are in their essence light and you know, divine presence, kind of whatever connects us all to a greater source, that they are also, and that just happens to be the form that they are in right now. And maybe they are more, maybe they're a higher dimension. You know, for the most part, we exist here as humans in the third dimensional world, but fourth and fifth dimensions are where we start to actually be able to connect vibrationally with other people and with other beings, right? So yeah, it's interesting. It's a really, you could go on, and these are ideas that have been floating throughout humanity, and obviously there's evidence that there were things visiting the earth, you know, since the dawn of humanity, in terms of hieroglyphics and things like that exist that suggest that. And a lot of theories, you know, if you watch the show Ancient Aliens, for instance, there's so many theories about how even humans got started. It's really funny. So my ghost tour that I do, there's this one section of it in the extended version, about the Heaven's Gate, cult. And you guys might remember that in 1997, Marshall Applewhite, he had this Heaven's Gate cult, and they, you know, believed they're the ones that committed a mass suicide, right? In their Nike jumpsuits, no less. But he was somebody who believed that that we were all aliens, like, and he you know, believed there were good ones and there were bad ones, and believed that Jesus Christ was in fact an alien himself, and that when the Virgin Mary when she conceived him, she was actually taken up to a spaceship where they impregnated her with Jesus, and that's how she came to be. Marshall Applewhite believed he was the second coming of Christ, and had all these really kind of far out there notions. But the funny thing is, at their core, they're ideas that still resonate with groups and lots of people today. Like he was a whack job, of course, and got people to commit suicide with the understanding or the belief that they were going to then ascend to a spaceship in the tail of the Hale-Bopp comet and kind of be whatever back in there. And maybe they did. I don't know. Maybe they did. But we'll never know. But I just think it's every time I do that talk on my show, I'm like, oh, this guy, maybe he wasn't really far off. So sometimes we have to, we certainly have to take the stories of particularly the mentally ill or even anybody, we have to take them with a grain of salt, but there can always be a matter of truth to something too, right? And so, yeah, I mean, UFOs, aliens, are they here? Why would they be here? What do they want? Are they observing us? Are they trying to learn from us? Are they trying to protect us? Are they trying to steal from us? Like maybe there's like 100 different versions of aliens. I mean, if all the different sightings, Dean mentioned the Tic Tac shaped one, but I mean, there's lots of different kinds of aircraft or UFO craft, I should say, that have been seen and are very different, from saucers to triangle shaped things and boxy shaped things like the one that I saw that was completely not aerodynamic by any term, that we understand here. But yeah, and are they here? Do they want to be seen? And Jim asked this question, and I like about people choosing, like, why, if that's the case, if it's not really about just more people looking to the sky and looking for these things, maybe they're choosing to be seen now, and why would that be, right? I don't know. And my, again, then going to Dean's comment about how more and more people, and I believe this to be true, I think more and more people are ascending, are learning how to vibrate higher. And so there could be information that now, again, we're more fine-tuned. So when he talks about more craft coming through, maybe it's not even just the craft, maybe it's their vibrations, it's their information that we're then able to download. It's all kind of intertwined. And it's funny because in my weird brain, it all kind of makes some matter of sense. I don't, as I say all the time, I don't know what I don't necessarily choose to believe in any one thing for sure. Like, I'm just open and I love to have the discussion, and a lot of things make sense to me, sometimes in ways that I don't know why they make sense to me. It's just like, yeah, I get that. I'm not really sure why, but I get that. And so I think when you think about it, we all get these different pieces of information, and maybe we're meant to put them all together to figure out what the truth is. But there's definitely something out there, something's going on. People are noticing it. And again, are they just hanging out and watching, or are they walking among us, or are we them and they are us? And what hand do they have in who we are and how we do things? The other thing is how readily, for instance, is our government communicating with them? They, if there's this great show that I watch on, it's YouTube or Prime. It's a documentary series called Hellier, and awesome group of people. Some that I interact quite a bit with on Facebook. They so Dana and Greg Newkirk, they run the traveling museum of the paranormal and the occult, and they do a lot of work with like haunted objects and things like that. And they're just super duper cool kind of people. But anyway, this show was originally started about these goblins that live in the mines of in Kentucky. And you can go read about it. This is a thing. Like this is a belief system that kind of resonates throughout the paranormal world. And they were getting these weird things, so they kind of went on this hunt. Well, through the show, they pretty much just follow the messages. So they kind of get off of the goblin thing for a while and do do go into this stuff about aliens and the third order, which is a system, according to some people. It's kind of like an interstellar like governing body, essentially, and that there are people on the earth that are of different places and interact with human beings. And so there's that. I mean, they get into a lot of different things because they just follow it, but in the end, I mean, you start to realize how intertwined all of this is, how much it's really intertwined with us as human beings as well. But if you're into really high strangeness, check out Hellier. It's really great. Like I said, you can find it on YouTube or Prime Video. So there's that. And I mean, I think this stuff is so crazy. Now let's talk about, you may have noticed that I put that I'm not an abductee. So there's another whole level to this. People who claim that they are not even just one-off abductees, but there are people who claim that they go all the time. And I watch a lot of this stuff, and I'm not trying to be an expert on all of this, but it kind of informs my thinking about a lot of different things. So I watch a lot of stuff, and I'm totally blanking. Someone might be able to chime in. Well, I don't know if any of you guys will, but somebody who listens later might be able to chime in about, there's a documentary series about a guy who is pretty famous for believing he's an abductee. And he even, has a family in another star system and talks about it. And it's really creepy. Like, you can say, oh my God, that's ridiculous. But I challenge you to find these shows and watch them, and not think about things a little differently when you're done. Like, just go into it with an open mind, because it is hard to wrap your head around all of it. But some of it at the same time is like, okay, yeah, I can see that. That would make sense. It's just fascinating. But there's a number on YouTube. There's a number of documentaries about abductees that are really interesting. And, of course, they have all their they have abductee gatherings and stuff like that, which I think would be a really fascinating thing to attend, to be quite honest, just to kind of go and talk to those people and hear their weird stories. But, if there are aliens coming and hovering above the earth all over the world, I mean, it stands to reason, maybe they are wanting to do that. Yes, Betty and Barney Hill, really famous abductees, Dean. And yeah, nobody can disprove it. From the beginning, there was nothing about their story that made people think they were lying. Just a really, check out Betty and Barney Hill. They're again one of the top. I shared a post shortly before I came live about some abductees. I think there's like the top 5 or something, and Betty and Barney are in there. And, these are people that just out of the blue, this happens to. There's that great show, Fire in the Sky. And that's a true story about abductees, or an abductee. And so there's interesting stuff about that. And it's kind of intriguing. And, here's the thing. It's kind of scary, too, which is why I think a lot of people don't want to go down that road and consider it. I don't think it's a general concern to be abducted. I don't think that that's something that's going to happen very, very readily. Yes, Travis Walton. I think he's also one of those top ones. Dean's on this. See, I love it when there's people on, because a lot of this stuff for me is like, the specifics are peripheral, right? But it's just the theories and the ideas that resonate from all of these stories that are really fascinating to me. And so thank you, Dean, for chiming in with those names. So there's a couple of people, if you're interested in looking into those or reading about them, Betty and Barney Hill, Travis Walton. I don't think Travis is the one I'm thinking of. I'm going to have to look up the one that I watched the documentary on. I will look it up and I will share it on Whiskey and Weird on the Facebook page, because it's a really interesting story. And, the guy's wife, I think she's been abducted a couple times, but mostly just to meet his other family. It's been a while since I watched it. But it's really fascinating. And, these people, they believe their experience, right? So oh, that reminds me, on that show Hellier, they do this interesting hypnotic experience. um Basically, though, in this, the flip side is showing the possibility that people can be given memories of things that didn't really happen. Which is an interesting, kickback to our conversation about memories and how they lie, and how, sometimes, oh yes, gotcha, Dean. Awesome. Travis Walton. He's the fire in the sky guy. Thank you very much. But uh, okay, now I just lost my train of thought. Let me have a sip of whiskey and maybe it will come right back to me. It's not coming back to me. Who can tell me what I was talking about right before I read Dean's comment? He's the fire in the sky guy. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. It'll come back to me in a minute. All of this stuff, just it's all entwined. It's all interesting. Oh, I know what it was. I remember now. It was the Hellier thing and this idea of memories, and they did this hypnotic experience, basically, where they created a memory in this guy, like, essentially, and he was the dude 100% when he was done with the session believed that he had been abducted by aliens, and hadn't necessarily, it was really kind of creepy to think about. So therein then lies the question of, you're finding this is just how my brain works. Anyway, therein lies the question too, like how often is the government in cahoots here? How often are these stories real? How often are they pretend because someone created them? Or maybe we think we're putting a memory into someone's head, but it's really it's just latent information that's been buried in there and something triggered it. I don't know. It's all really fascinating. And for me, I kind of am resonating a lot with the idea of this notion of being light beings, and this vibrational thing that Dean mentioned, and how we're all connected in that way, and thereby we're from some star system somewhere. You might have like heard of like star seeds and things like that, like really specifically people who are from the stars. Well, I don't think that those people are really unique. I just think that those are people that for whatever reason are more connected to those things. I've talked on here before about like past lives and other things that we're experiencing, and I don't believe that this experience on this earth right now is the only one that we've ever had. I think that's very likely. We've been on the earth many times. Our soul, our lights, our light being, and possibly in other star systems. And it's really interesting to hear people talk about that when they do claim to have memories from those different places. So I don't know if anyone's heard any of this stuff. Some of this might be really far out there, but I have been, I've been looking into this stuff for a long time, and dealing with my own kind of stuff. And so, I've kind of gone down the rabbit hole, but not in a bad way. I mean, the people I meet are really fascinating. Fascinating. So, hi, Kate. You have memories of past lives. I get it. Yeah, not your current past. Yeah, me too. Definitely, for sure. I think a lot of us do. We don't realize it, that's what it is. But I think that we are, we come down here and we come back to this experience to learn something, whatever that center of us, that light, our soul. And, it's interesting how all of this kind of spins around religion, or religion spins around it. Like a lot of these concepts and these people coming in and these aliens possibly. Yes, you're my man, Dean. We need to sit down and talk about all of this stuff. We are all aliens in a sense. It's exactly what I'm getting at. I actually think that I am most recently from the Andromeda star system, to be honest. Yeah, so Dean, you're my man. This is cool stuff. But it's kind of weird for most people, right? You probably can agree with me that it's weird for most people, but I love talking about it. I love giving people the creeps sometimes, like what the hell? Yeah. No, it's yeah, Dean. Kim can come along, of course, because I love her. But yeah, we should definitely talk about this stuff. I don't find very many people who are like in my closer circle of friends that even know what any of that is. So that's fantastic. Do you know? Do you have a feeling of where you might have been previously? I'm wondering, or is this just something that you are getting into? But anyway, I love it. I love this. I'm going to put this up so people can see this. So this is kind of what I'm getting at without getting directly at it, because it is very deep and weird. But yeah, we're all aliens. We're from different star systems, and those same star systems also being connected in and of themselves, right? Too. So therein lies this idea of God and this one creator that created us all, that we're all from the same source of light. And then there's these kinds of things that religion actually came from, and these original aliens coming to the earth are quite possibly the first deities, the gods that even the Greeks and the Romans were worshiping, were these things that were here on the earth, like the even the giants that people claim, and we're starting actually to get archaeological evidence of these giants and creatures that people never thought were real. And all intertwined with the whole alien thing. So I think it's easy to think, if you get to the place where you believe in aliens, it's easiest to think about them like as just these the gray guys, the gray beings with the big heads and the big eyeballs in the sky, right? Because that's pretty safe. Hi, Sister Karen. My sister's here, one of them. Yeah, the movie Stargate. Yeah, so anyway, so it's easy to think about that, but there's a lot of evidence, there's a lot of information out there to lend itself to this notion that it's much bigger, and we are much more connected to those spaceships that we're witnessing. And for me, I didn't think that it was a coincidence, to be honest, that my eye was drawn to the sky in that moment and kept there, by the airplane, by the bird. And then I saw this thing in the sky that there's no way I would have ever noticed otherwise. And so I think there's something to that. And I believe that there is something to everything. Everything's connected. There's no such thing as a coincidence, right? So let's see. Dean says, I had an astrology chart analyzed, 3 lives in Arcturus and 2 in the Pleiades. Yeah, I think many of us have been, and many of us have been here on Earth many times, because it's in this belief system, these beings, the ones that would be kind of the ascended beings in all of this, basically, there's this theory and idea passed down through messages. So just get this, take it all with a grain of salt, that they created the human race as kind of an experiment. Humans, compared to what beings in these other star systems, humans have, according to these beliefs, have a much larger range of emotions than any other beings in the universe, in the galaxy, in the whole stars, all the star systems. And so it's really about it's about an experiment, and it's about learning things and working towards this ascension process, this high vibrational kind of thing. So all this stuff is really intertwined. Yes, Karen, you are an alien. And here I'm going to pull up, my sister says, one of her ex-boyfriends, John Leonard, and I saw one at night in Germany in 1988, moved slowly across the night sky, then stopped, then took off at a right angle and disappeared. Yeah, pretty common. I mean, what the hell does that? Who knows what's inside, but it is, as of yet, an unidentified flying object, right? And even today, we don't have any crafts, flying crafts that can can go as fast as some of these things that are in the sky, or shoot off at the weird angles that they do, or multiply. I mean, there's a lot of them. Like, think about all the different ones people see. Some of them just look like big lights that like start to multiply right in front of people's eyes. Sometimes, again, they're like shaped like a tic tac or a square, or yes, not conventional craft. So they're not things that we have here. And you know, sometimes people say, oh, it's just the military testing stuff. Well, where the hell is the military getting some of this information, right? So maybe they do have contacts with things. What I think is also interesting is when you have stories, and I was just reading something the other day, like different science stuff that comes out, and there's always like this random throwback guy that came up with stuff. They're like, oh yeah, this is based on this guy's work 50 years ago that nobody took seriously. So one, how does this guy know about this? Is he a time traveler? Is he someone who just was given that information to start planting those seeds so that, you know, humanity could progress the way it needs to? But you know, I would suggest that maybe, you know, that was information that he came here with, or that someone fed him so that he could do that. Because what are the odds? And that happens all the time. Like any really big theories that eventually come, they are not just something that one, you know, someone randomly, you know, one day thought of and everyone took it up. It happens all the time. So why? I mean, and I can speak from experience. There's things that I just understand that I've never heard about before that someone tells me, and I'm like, yeah, I feel like I knew that already, and there's no explanation for why I should have known it. I don't know if anyone else has had those experiences. My sister Karen, I know, has. So Dean says back engineering of craft retrievals, Roswell and others, perhaps. Yeah, that's kind of my point, Dean, is like, you know, when we get these, how are we figuring this out? Well, yeah, probably because either we have found aircraft that isn't of this earth, or maybe we actually are in, you know, communication with people that, you know, that can give us the information, or whatever, however people get it. I mean, if you think about like psychic ability and meditation and astral projecting and all of these things, all of this stuff is about retrieving information through your energy, your energetic systems, your energy systems. And so I mean, people don't even need to go anywhere or travel anywhere. This information can actually just come to you. It's how we, you know, do things like Reiki. And it's how I can do a remote viewing and be able to name things that are occurring in a house that's 3,000 miles away from me. You know, how do people do that? Because stuff travels vibrationally and energetically, right? And so I think we probably communicate with these things that way. And to Dean's point, we're becoming more attuned to it. And so there's maybe more reason for them to show up, because they're like, okay, now there's people here that actually can pick up what we're trying to put out. Let's see. My sister has another cool comment. Let's check it out. Daddy, that would be our dad, said in college that someone he knew borrowed a car, drove it around a bunch, but didn't have to fuel it up for more than a month. And then some guys from the government came by and took the car back. Yes, I remember that story. Yeah, so the government knows stuff, and maybe they just figured it out, or maybe they're getting it from somewhere else. I don't know. Anyway, I could talk about this for a while. I'm running up on my hour, and my recording for the podcasts will cut off at an hour, and I could start it again, but it's better for me to take a break. But I bet we could talk more about this, and even getting in, we haven't done a lot around the energy piece, because I'm trying to finish up my Reiki training and be able to really feel like I'm informed about that to do. But Dean, I'm glad you were here. Karen, Jim, Tracy, anybody who's stuck around, anybody, Kate, I'm glad you were here. It's always fun. And Dean, I'm serious. We need to like hang out and talk about that stuff, because like I said, nobody I know really really knows anything about it or wants to go there. But it's fascinating. If nothing else, it's absolutely fascinating. So you guys, thanks for being here. Join me again next week, and maybe we'll talk a little more about this. I don't really know yet. It's always up in the air. Maybe something will present itself to me synchronistically. But I will be enjoying some Irish whiskey in honor of St. Patrick's Day, because I will not have a show on St. Patrick's Day. I will be imbibing and enjoying some Irish fare with my family on that night. So love you too, Sister Karen. And topic is fun, right? It's there's so much weird stuff out there, and things are just so much bigger than just spaceships in the sky, right? So anyway, I love you all. Join me next week. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening in later, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thanks, Jim. Take care, guys.